Do you want to learn more on how to put money to work in regenerative food and agriculture? Follow our video course via investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/course or in the links below. Now, on to the podcast. This interview is a check-in interview with Eric Jackson of Pipeline Foods, and we dive deep into transition finance, how to finance farmers and get many more row crop acres into organic and eventually regenerative production. Welcome to another episode of Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Investing as if the planet mattered, a podcast show where I talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land, grow our food and what we eat. And it's time that we as investors, big and small, and consumers start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet. Before we get started, I've been recording these interviews next to my day job, and I will definitely continue to do so and release about an episode a month. But at the same time, I would love to take this further, share more interviews. There are many more stories to share on investing in regenerative food and agriculture. More depth, improve the quality, maybe even doing some video series. So I started a Patreon community, which makes it easy to support creators like myself. If these podcasts have been of value to you, and if you have the means, I invite you to support me and make this happen. For more information, please find the link to my Patreon account in the description below. And now, without further ado, the interview. Enjoy! Welcome to a new episode. I'm Koen van Seijen, your host, and today I have the great pleasure to have Eric Jackson back on the podcast. I've interviewed him in June 2018, so almost a year ago. And although we talked for over an hour, we had so much more to cover. I will link the earlier interview in the show notes below. Eric is the founder and CEO of Pipeline Foods, who after a career in conventional chemical agriculture and software could retire, but decided to build the missing link in organic broad acre row crops, mainly corn and soy. Welcome back, Eric.
Thank you, Koen. It's a pleasure to be back with you after, as you pointed out, almost a year. It's been a busy year for us here at Pipeline Foods. We've continued to focus on investing in infrastructure that helps to support the marketplace for organic and other specialty broadacre crops, as you pointed out. So this is all of the corn, beans, wheat, small grains, oil seeds, your primary row crop acres. I'm trying to remember over the last 12 months everything that we've done. Most recently, we purchased a division of a publicly traded company called Sunopta.
That must have been an interesting process. We could spend a whole podcast probably on that.
Entirely, yeah. But the nice thing about this is that this is probably the oldest legacy business in the midstream space for organic grains. They've been, in one way or another, they've been doing this for almost 40 years before organic was even, a federal law here in the U.S. Based primarily in Minnesota with some exposure in Iowa. For us, it was the opportunity to pick up a team of very good people, along with some strategically located assets to continue to sort of fill in our footprint from an asset standpoint. So today now, again, not realizing exactly where we left off the last time we spoke, but today now we have 2 elevators in Saskatchewan, 2 elevators in North Dakota, 4 locations in Minnesota, an elevator in Iowa, corn processing facility in Iowa, soy processing facility in Missouri, soft seed crushing facility that we have a joint venture with out in Oregon. And we also have leased an elevator in Argentina, in Santa Fe province.
And how many acres are you touching now? Because I remember something about I think 1.5 million last time we talked, but I will definitely put the numbers below in the show notes. But where are we now?
I think that, I'm not sure that we've actually increased the number of acres that we're touching more than we've filled in with some critical locations so that those acres that we're touching are better served.
And does it also mean different species? You're now different crops. You're now able to handle more.
Yeah, we have expanded. We have quite a bit more food grade non-GMO soybeans going for export, primarily to the Far East. That's been one of the results of the SunOpta acquisition.
Which is interesting because you mentioned in the interview before that you are starting this as well to serve the local, meaning US market, as you are a net importer of organic soybeans.
Yeah.
Which is crazy as a huge soybean producer.
I know. Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, I think if our goal is met, the U.S., I'll just say North America in general, will be self-sufficient, and for organic and perhaps for regenerative organic crops, for all those varieties that we can grow here. Of course, there's a lot of things that we can't grow in North America, but the broadacre crops, we can largely grow those here in North America. And we continue to focus on trying to make the midstream more efficient, because that means that then there's more money to be able to share with the grower instead of spending, silly amounts of money moving stuff all over the place, which has historically been the case. We're able to now capture these bushels, these tons of products closer to the farm gate and be able to, clean them and process them and put them on rail much sooner, so that now you're saving a lot of money on all the logistics between the farm and the ultimate consumption. That's why you invest in assets to begin with, is to lower the per unit cost of production and handling. Otherwise, there's no reason to have assets.
And you are placing them much closer to almost more decentralized processing compared to the very centralized. Only a few spots in North America can handle certain things, which means everything is dragged around way too many times.
Yeah, exactly. So these are dedicated facilities serving, again, probably 90% of our volume is in the organic grain space. We do have some non-GMO. We're doing a couple of other specialty things for some customers that have asked us to do such work, but organic is really our focus. And, the demand continues to increase here in North America in particular. We're trying to get the acres built up to meet that demand. And, one of the clearest ways to send a signal to the marketplace, especially to the farmers, is to have, a flag flying in their neighborhood with a facility that can serve their needs. And that's what these investments are all about.
And do you see the acre size as you are now? I think you're turning 3 this year, or like the end of the year somewhere?
We were 2 in February.
Ah, wow. Okay. You're turning 3 next year. Sorry.
Yeah.
And it is a 3-year period, the conversion. Does it mean that you will have a lot more acres with the farmers you're working with coming online over the next, let's say, 18 months or so? Is that restricting you at the moment, or what do you see there? Because you mentioned let's have more acres, let's have more organic acres online.
Yeah. So, last year for the 2018 crop year in North America, we participated in helping growers convert about 60,000 new acres into what we call T1, which is the first year of transition. If they do this properly, they begin in the fall. And so they really only sacrifice 2 crop years where they're doing the organic practice and not getting paid for it. And the third crop year, they can realize the organic label and get paid for it. This year, heading into 2019, it's a very strange year in North America because a lot of the crop area in the Midwest in particular, we've seen immense amounts of moisture. So we started a lot of projects this year that unfortunately probably aren't going to go through because, quite frankly, there's going to be a lot of acres that won't even be planted this year in the Midwest of the U.S. It keeps on raining, and it's the window for production planting is closing rapidly. And if you don't get the crop in the ground, sometime in the next 10 days, you're probably better off in the U.S. taking the crop insurance option for what they call prevented planting, which pays the farmer under certain circumstances because he wasn't able to plant. So this year's a very strange year. If we had stayed on course, I think our projects would have added another maybe 100,000 acres of T1 for this year.
But if it's not planted, does it count as T2?
Yeah, so they can still go through the product. It depends. Yeah, it's complicated. There's a lot of rules and regulations, right?
Let's not get into the details. But I just realized if you're not planting it and thus not farming it, the land has that year.
If you started T1 last year, and you don't do anything this year, it still continues to. It's still
like
a small
T2 silver lining in a horrible year.
Yeah. So again, agriculture is agriculture, and every year you have a different set of weather circumstances. And this year just happens to be one of the wettest on record, particularly across the main growing regions in the U.S. But the projects are going well. I mean, I think it's still a challenge to get growers who have not had any experience with organic to make that transition. We've had more success helping growers and encouraging growers who have some organic experience to expand their organic operations. That seems to, one of the things we learned over the last year is that seems to be a little bit a path of less resistance.
So someone who already farmed maybe part of his farm or her farm or maybe one of their farms organic, to nudge them or to pull them into, let's do the whole farm, or let's increase the acres.
Or let's do at least more. Yeah, let's at least increase the acres. And we've been introducing large landowners to farmers who are capable of doing the organic, or I shouldn't say who are capable, but who are experienced with doing organic, because there are landowners that would like to have their farms or their land treated organically, but they don't know any growers that that have the experience. So we've been successful in making those introductions as well.
That could scale pretty quickly if you have a good let's say set of farmers that are able and have the experience to do that, and if you have enough of those, it could scale quite quickly.
Yeah, the trick is to find the land. I mean,
nearby.
It's difficult to farm a long ways away, right? So it's not impossible, but it's more of a challenge. So trying to match up these footprints of in some cases institutional landowners with the points on the map where the growers live and work today, that's a little bit of an art.
Because probably these great farmers they can choose as well. They don't need to take, because they have their own farm, they can expand there as well. They don't need to take, in many cases, they need to take all these extra clients.
Correct. That's correct. So everything has a little bit of success to it. It's a long-term project. It takes a while to make these things happen. And to the point that we've both made, there's still this transition time, which you cannot speed up. So everything that we do today, is in the earliest result possible is going to be 3 crop years out. So it takes a bit of patience. We have been somewhat successful in connecting commercial lenders, with farmers to provide them assistance during the transition process. One of the things we talked about last time was, this challenge that lenders don't know. And, we're talking primarily banks right now. They too don't have experience with organic, and in some cases they're reluctant to give the farmers operating loans on terms that realize the challenges during the transition period, right? So we've worked hard over the last year to put together. We have 2 banks now that are willing to make these loans to these growers that are transitioning acres, and both of these banks have successfully, made these loans already available. I can't remember exactly. I think we have about a dozen of them in process right now.
And basically, those banks also, they need to start thinking a bit longer term, and not just year by year, because these farmers embark on a 3, 5, 6 year journey, maybe their whole farm, maybe part of their farm, etc. But the results are very interesting. I mean, the cost savings and the premium, obviously, after 3 years start to become very, very interesting, but you do need to get there. So was that a long process, difficult process to get these banks to see like the business sense it makes for their clients, their farmers, to go through the process?
I think it was, they were dealing a little bit with the unfamiliar, and
organic is for hippies.
Yeah. And I mean, bankers aren't necessarily the most ready to move on new things, right? They are very much in a risk mitigation mode.
Some bankers,
with their business. Some bankers, yeah, true. But I'll be candid with you. We've had our most success with Rabobank. Rabobank is our commercial bank here at Pipeline Foods, and they also have come alongside us to provide transition financing. We've built a product, essentially a lending product, which gives the grower the opportunity to borrow money to make it through the transition period and pay it back on an extended basis once they reach the organic status and have the additional funds to be able to pay that back. it's a creative product. It will probably get tweaked and improved as the years go on, but at least, you have Rabo's the largest agricultural lender in the world. And because they are our commercial bank and because we have sort of a shared view of sustainable agriculture, it's been very fun to work with them on this project because it's at some level, it's almost infinitely scalable with the size of resources that they have. So this year we're going to pilot probably a half dozen or so projects with them where we're providing a long-term offtake agreement. They're providing the working capital. The farmer's in a position to win through this, three-way relationship. We think that has a tremendous opportunity to scale. And that's for us, one of the greatest successes this year is putting that program together.
It's very, very exciting. I saw a news item on them actually in the Netherlands of, I think, some loans to also farmers, in this case dairy, and that actually the interest rate could be slightly modified, so slightly lower if they hit certain biodiversity targets and certain soil biodiversity targets as well. Very, very small scale stuff, obviously, but interestingly, they're also connecting how they were doing sustainable on the sustainability indexes to actually paying less for your loan in this case.
Yep.
So they're playing. Yep. They're definitely flexing their muscles in the space because I think also they see, or they should see, that the farmers that are willing to go through this transition are probably the more entrepreneurial, the more farmers with more potential. And as a bank, I think you want to be part of that.
Yeah, I mean, we were very happy with. We continue to be very happy with our relationship with them, and they've been. Very progressive in terms of their approach to this whole sector. And, again, I'm sure that what we have done this year is not going to be the final of what we will do in the future. But at this point, it's a good first step, and we're very pleased. And again, because of the size of the institution and because of their presence, especially in North America, we feel like this year, assuming success this year, that we'll really be able to push hard for the 2020 crop year and sign up a lot more acres using this, this lending mechanism that Rabo has architected expressly for this purpose. And we've also been working with some non-GM, some non-governmental, some NGO organizations, as well as foundations who are interested in supporting this. So we're experimenting with whether they too can come alongside the bank and help participate in either de-risking the bank's position or perhaps lowering the interest rate for the farmer. So we continue to explore.
How would that work? Just dreaming. I mean, obviously that's a pilot or it's an idea, but how would that, just sketching your ideal, how would that work?
These institutions have capital. Some of it's philanthropic capital. Some of it is investable capital, either as equity or debt. So for those institutions that are inclined to view agriculture, sustainable agriculture, regenerative agriculture, organic agriculture as being mission critical to their, to whatever it is that their purpose for being, they view agriculture as being one of the important components of their portfolio. We've had a number of very interesting conversations because they're looking for ways that they can take their not insignificant amount of capital, but certainly not as much as somebody like a Rabobank has, and use it to create, sort of an ignition device that will, again, either de-risk the bank's position, perhaps as a guarantor, if you will, of the loan from the farm to the farmer, or in other cases, what we've discussed is putting capital into a pool that comes alongside the bank capital. But the capital that the institution puts into the pool is at a much lower interest rate, and therefore on a blended basis, can bring down the interest rate to the grower. So these are two different mechanisms that we're fairly advanced in the conversation. I don't know that we're actually going to have any of those projects stood up for 2019. It's too late, I think, at this point. But I'm quite confident that we'll have one or more flavors of that type of idea in play for 2020.
Because is that one of the main things you see missing, this transition finance piece for your farmers, the farmers you're working with?
Correct. Yeah, we've been able to put together other resources like agronomists or, like I said, experienced growers on the
offtake agreements.
and the offtake agreements and everything else. But the transition financing has been tricky, and we identified it early, but it took us quite a while to find institutions banking institutions that were willing to participate. So we continue to press hard into that area. Financial support for growers who are going into a program that long term is going to serve them very well, but in the short term is a challenge, trying to match that up with commercial scale dollars to support them in that process.
Yeah, because when you say financial support, obviously everybody thinks, oh, they need nonprofit finance or they need grant support, but actually it's an investment. It's a long-term investment, but it's an investment.
It's a long-term investment, correct.
And
it's it's relatively easy to have the conversation today because conventional agriculture has been so difficult.
It's sort of helping you, yeah.
It's helping us, right? I mean, in the U.S., between heavy stocks of everything essentially, and now with the situation with the Chinese, we have quite a bit of unsold products still in the bins from last year, and at this time of the year, you'd like to see some of that stuff moving, but our number one customer is no longer our number one customer. So
when you say we, you mean you as an agriculture sector as a whole, not pipeline foods?
As a sector. No, I'm not pipeline, but I mean, I'm just talking about the sector as a whole.
Because you could absorb a lot more. I mean, you're pushing so hard on the acre, so hard on transition finance, because the market is asking you to supply more organic soy, corn, wheat, etc.
Correct. And, we keep on fighting this issue of these fraudulent imports coming in primarily from the Black Sea, as we're fighting the same battle the EU is, trying to keep the fraudulent organic products out of the supply chain. But in order to be able to do that, you have to have domestic product sufficient to meet the demand. You can't just shut the door on the one side, and not supply it on the other. So, as we build up these stocks, this production here in North America, we're more able to, defend ourselves, I guess I would say, from some of these profiteers who have been bringing stuff in that is sketchy at best.
Yeah, and it's much worse at worst.
Yeah, exactly. So that's been going well. We're excited about that. On the regenerative side, two things I guess would be probably reasonably interesting to report.
Yeah, because you mentioned regenerative organic actually, like just before, I think a few minutes ago. So what's been happening in that space?
Well, so now there is a regenerative organic label. It's yet another label, like we needed another label, but in any case we have it.
There's so much space on the packaging anyway, so let's fill it up.
Yeah. Right. So you can go to regenerative, I think it's regenerativeagriculture.com. I can't remember exactly what the website is, but
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, there is a label. A few very progressive food companies have signed up for this. It starts out with the USDA organic as the baseline, and then I think has 3 levels of improvement above that, which include, in the case of animals, certain animal welfare provisions. In the case of crops, certain situations like ground cover and water usage and things of this sort. So it is not caught on fire yet by any stretch of the imagination, but we are still trying to, encourage food companies that want to get more progressive, even beyond organic, that we can connect them with the growers that are interested in going down that path if they can find a value-added market for those crops. So that's still very early days, but it's gone beyond. So a year ago we were talking about an idea. Now there is a label, there is a structure. It's not a USDA.
It's not done yet as well. Yeah, I think at the end of the year there should be even more updates around it. But at least some people came together and sort of set the boundaries of what something could be.
Yeah, and it's outside of the regulations, so the USDA is not going to participate in overseeing the regenerative piece. But again, the baseline is USDA organic as the starting point, and the 3 levels above that the regenerative organic label offers are additions to the USDA organic seal. So we'll see. I mean, the market, the other problem with regenerative is, as with sustainability, I will say, is that the conventional guys are trying to figure out how to use all these taglines themselves.
Yeah, we've seen some very interesting examples of that from alcohol companies and I don't know what. We tried to cover it a bit in the newsroom, Regeneration Newsroom podcast I record with Ethan Soloviev, but it's been funny to see some things called regenerative that everybody can see has been very, very far from.
Yeah. And, I applaud all efforts to reduce chemical use, even if it's not fully organic.
Definitely.
Anytime that you can reduce the amount of chemical, I'm all in favor of that. But the idea that is regenerative, is still a long ways from the intended use of the word. So unfortunately, you can't patent words, that already exist. If you came up with a term that was a new word, perhaps you could patent that. But so we do see increasingly the conventional folks trying to, me too, these terms which are popular with consumers.
And do you see the market like strong? Do you see the main, let's say your current clients, your current the companies that buy these row crops, the processed row crops off you? Is there another conversation compared to a year ago? And is there interest in maybe this regenerative organic route, or is there another route they're interested in?
Well, I'd say again, it's slow to come. It has not caught fire by any stretch of the imagination. But there's a corner of the market that's interested in continuing to push for cleaner and cleaner, crops. And sometimes it's called regenerative. There's also been a significant movement, I think, globally against pesticide residues, and so may not be directly addressed in the regenerative label, so to speak. But I think, with the recent court cases here in the U.S. about glyphosate poisoning being awarded to individuals, and with I think the general understanding through testing that we're ingesting both through our food and our water more chemistry than we imagined. We see certain markets headed in the direction of glyphosate-free, for example, which isn't a regulated business model, but it means what it says. You cannot ship product into these markets, with glyphosate residues exceeding a certain amount, if at all. And so that's going to continue to change the nature of the way in which certain areas grow crops, because their markets may demand that they ship residue-free or minimal residue, and they don't fit neatly into the organic package. They don't fit neatly into the regenerative package, but it's a start.
But it's a start, right? It's I see the attention with the court cases now and things like Zach Bush and Farmers Footprint that finally we're getting more attention for that. We've discussed water before, actually a year ago, and the state of the water pollution in many, many farmers' areas. And finally, we're starting to discuss, way too late, obviously, but at least it's discussed, right. And at least the source is discussed, which is agriculture in many, many cases.
Well, and it's interesting because if you take the long view and think about converging concepts, some of the conversation that we've been seeing has headed towards, we spend this much money on chemicals and then we spend this much money on healthcare, right? And do the two have anything to do with each other? And there's an increasing body of evidence and certainly an increasing conversation that the two have everything to do with each other.
Food is medicine. Yeah. I think Hippocrates said that
right
3,000 years ago, or 2.5. Yeah.
And then, water as well, is, to the point that you're making, not only farm chemicals in water, but pharmaceutical chemicals in the water. So there's an increasing understanding that taking care of the environment is a good business. But boy, there's an awful lot of money and effort being spent by the incumbents in the space and the chemical and pharmaceutical industries to deny that there's any issues that have that exist or that there's something that we should be doing about them. So it's really at this point the consumer against industry. And that's pretty universal. It's not 100% the case, but it's pretty much going to be what's good for people versus what's good for certain companies' profits. And this is not going to be a battle that's going to be easily won till and unless the consumers have clear options and they're willing to make sure that they take money out of their wallet only for things that support whatever their view is of the marketplace. And it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be more expensive. that's one of the other great myths, is that everything has to be more expensive if it's not conventional. And I think that is maybe true in the short term, but the more that we can get, better environmental practices on the farm, the more universal that becomes. I don't think it necessarily leads to a higher cost of food. And if food is medicine, particularly here in the U.S., where we spend so little as a share of our wallet on food, if we spend a couple more points on good food, I think the outcomes will be obvious. So you can see it coming. It's all these conversations are sort of heading towards what I hope is a common understanding that we are what we eat, and that includes the environment. But we've got many generations of common practices that we have to just be patient. We have to keep on pushing, but we have to understand that nothing's going to happen overnight.
And actually, that's a perfect bridge to my final question. I asked it before, and I would want to see if your answer changed of maybe the last year. Change something on that. If you could change one thing overnight, if you could wave your magic wand and say, okay, tomorrow morning we'll wake up, what would it be?
I don't remember what I said a year ago. I think at this point, I've become, convinced that glyphosate as a herbicide and many of the pesticides are much more toxic than we've understood in the past. I would do away with them. And I think that there's a short-term reality to that means you have to manage things in a different way. But the longer-term reality is that nature is adapting much more quickly than we can in the chemistry lab. And, so all these pests that we've been fighting, particularly on the herbicide side of things, these plants are becoming increasingly tolerant. The same thing's happening in human medicine as well, right? I think we have to be careful not to encourage Mother Nature to come out with her most recent version of tolerant strains of
most recent inventions. Yeah, they could be very dangerous.
Yeah, our most recent invention that can be very dangerous. So that is, I think in the last year in particular, that conversation has me. I'm happy that we're having that conversation. It's become such a constant conversation that you can't help but go to bed at night a little bit worried about the state of things. So I would say getting rid of glyphosate and getting rid of certain classes of pesticides would be probably my number one wish at this point.
And I always do this. The problem is I ask a final question and then I come up with another one. How could people help you? What could people, there are quite some investors listening to the case, maybe not the size of Rabobank and institutional investors like that, but it might have creativity, or what would be something that people can help you and Pipeline Foods with, let's say in the next year?
I think funding for good science is important. We seem to have gotten ourselves to a point where we're sort of selectively using science as a weapon. We've taken science out of the public domain and put it in the private domain. And the danger with that is that whoever funds whatever scientific experiment, of course, gets the answer they're looking for. And that, to me, is extremely dangerous. So I would say funding for, public funding for research so that science has a objective voice in these conversations is ultimately going to be the most critical path forward. It's very hard for us to find publicly funded research anymore on some of these topics because it simply has been defunded and put in the private domain.
And with that, I cannot agree more, obviously. I want to thank you for your time, Eric. And
thanks, Koen.
I'll be checking in with you again somewhere over the next years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
I hope you enjoyed this update with Eric and learned something about the challenges and opportunities of transition finance. If you found the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast valuable, there are a few simple ways you can use to support it. Number 1, rate and review the podcast on your podcast app. That's the best way for other listeners to find the podcast, and it only takes a few seconds. Number 2, share this podcast on social media or email it to your friends and colleagues. Number 3, if this podcast has been of value to you and if you have the means, please join my Patreon community to help grow this platform and allow me to take it further. You can find all the details on patreon.com/regenerativeagriculture or in the description below. Thank you so much and see you at the next podcast. Dear friends of the podcast, I'm super excited to share with you the online video course Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. How to put money to work in regenerating soils at scale and growing a lot of tasty food while doing it. Why are we doing this course? After 100 interviews and more than 100 hours of audio asking the question how to put money to work in regenerating soils, and have been following the space since 2011 and recording these podcasts since 2016, we thought it was time to share our lessons learned. What have we seen in the space over the last years? How have we built our decision-making framework? What to focus on with the podcast? How have we picked interviewees? And what questions should you ask? What is happening in the space? What should you read? What should you listen? What should you watch? How to approach this space. For whom is this course? You, the soil builders and investors in this space. The soil builders, people working in this space, entrepreneurial farmers, fund managers, vehicle builders, crowd investing, platform builders, ag-tech companies, farm-to-gut food companies, permaculture, keyline designers, holistic management consultants, etc., etc. People that are building soil at scale. And the investors who are putting their own money to work through their family office or as private individuals, or people who are putting other people's money to work through foundations, institutional capital, banks, insurance companies, etc. Is this course free? No. This is pay what you think it's worth. Meaning, I have no way of knowing what this course will be worth to you. And I'm very aware that among the listeners of this podcast, we have people with very different means. So I'm inviting you, if this course is creating value to you, and if you have the means, to consider paying what you think it's worth. Thank you. So what is this course? It's currently a series of 17 videos, mostly ranging from 10 to 15 minutes, plus PDF slides, so you don't have to ride along. We're gonna look into why invest in regenerative agriculture and why extractive agriculture is so risky, how to invest, what kind of frameworks you could and I think should build, what to invest in, what kind of co-investors you could find, or what kind of investors you could find if you're a soil builder. Every lesson will have a digging deeper part where I will share what kind of reports, what kind of interviews, what kind of videos you can look into if you want to dig deeper. We're going to look at nutrient density, landscape design, and a lot more. So what is it not? It's not a list of investable deals. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in this world. We're really at the beginning of the regenerative agriculture and food revolution. It's also not investment advice. Before making any investment, please find professional investment advice. So get ready, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever you're drinking. Click on the link below, sign up, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback.